The trial of George Pino is set to begin with opening statements on Monday, June 8th, 2026 in the Miami-Dade Circuit Court before Judge Marisa Tinkler Mendez. We'll be watching the trial here on this channel. Here's the backstory. On September 4th, 2022, Labor Day weekend, a 29-foot 2019 Robalo R302 center console boat slammed into green marker number 15 in the Cutter Bank channel of Biscayne Bay near Boca Chita Key. 17-year-old Lucy Fernandez was trapped underneath the capsized vessel and drowned. Her classmate, Katy Puig, suffered a traumatic brain injury and lifelong disabilities. 11 other teens were on board for a birthday celebration. The man at the helm of the ship was George Pino. He's a Doral real estate broker and avid boater with hundreds of hours on this exact vessel. He had traversed the same channel at least 41 times in the prior 2 years and avoided marker 15 times since December 2021. GPS tracking showed that the boat traveled the equivalent of nearly 2 football fields on a collision course at around 47 miles per hour, with no sudden turns or course corrections until impact with the channel marker. Pino was the owner of this boat. Notably, it had a center console with 360-degree visibility and 2 Simrad GPS navigation units. It was equipped with 2 300-horsepower Yamaha engines capable of 54 to 55 mile-per-hour top speeds. During the September 4th, 2022 outing, George Pino, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Carolina, who was turning 18, and 11 of her friends left Ocean Reef Club around 2:52 p.m. They anchored near Billy's Point off of Elliott Key for nearly 3 hours. 4 boats total met there. The passengers of the boats reported that they helped themselves to alcoholic drinks from a cooler on Pino's boat, and that empties from the multiple boats were tossed aboard and later put into the live well. At approximately 6:18 p.m., the Robalo left for the return to Ocean Reef. Pino was at the helm. Nobody was assigned as a lookout. No one was wearing life jackets on the return trip either. The boat was yacht certified and exempt from the fixed capacity plate requirement. With 14 people aboard on this trip, every seat was filled and the boat had 7 passengers, adding significant weight. The boat entered the narrow Cutter Bank channel, which has widths that vary from roughly 119 to 171 feet at the different markers. GPS data showed that Pino accelerated during this time, with average speeds in the upper 30s through the channel. Conditions were clear daylight, calm water, no storms, no obstructions. Channel marker 15 was visible on charts, on Pino's GPS, and had a large neon green sign. For at least 9 seconds, the vessel was on a direct collision course with the marker. It's estimated that the collision occurred at 47 miles per hour. The boat capsized and everybody was ejected. George Pino hit his head. He was briefly unconscious on the deck, and then helped pull Lucy to the surface after being directed to do so. Lead Florida Wildlife Conservation, or FWC, investigator William Thompson, who's now a lieutenant and certified drug recognition expert, responded to the scene. He later wrote in his August 2023 incident summary report that Pino showed no signs of impairment when officers arrived or when Thompson interviewed him 1.5 to 2.5 hours later. Thompson concluded alcohol was not a contributing factor to the collision. A steering inspection found no pre-impact mechanical issues. Although at times George Pino claimed that another boat went by and caused a wake right before the collision, camera footage and witness statements show no other large vessel creating a wake in the minutes before the impact. GPS also showed no sharp maneuvers. Thompson's report noted Pino's familiarity with the area and stated that Pino did not operate in a reasonable and prudent manner, and lacked due regard for all the apparent circumstances, but explicitly found his actions did not constitute reckless operation. The case was forwarded for review. Around this time in August 2023, Pino was charged with 3 misdemeanors for careless boating causing injury or death, but the families of the victims pushed for more information.
They really, didn't take the time or, didn't do their due diligence with this case.
There was definitely alcohol in the boat, and that wasn't really looked at too much by FWC.
The Miami Herald began reporting in the summer of 2024, highlighting that key Good Samaritan witnesses who helped perform CPR and saw the immediate aftermath were never properly interviewed. The attorney for the Fernandez family, Joel De Niro, located some of these witnesses. A firefighter by the name of Matthew Smiley ended up coming forward in the fall of 2024 after reading the articles from the Miami Herald and stated that he observed signs of impairment while helping George Pino that day. On October 31st, 2024, the state upgraded the charges. In an order signed by County Court Judge Lizzie Paget, the case was transferred and upgraded to Marisa Tinkler Mendez under its new number F24-022896. At that time, the 3 counts were vessel homicide in a reckless manner, operating a vessel without required USCG safety gear, and vessel having an expired registration for 6+ months. George Pino self-surrendered on November 21, 2024, and was released on his own recognizance. A manslaughter count was later added in August of 2025, and on May 15, 2026, the charges related to the expired registration and operating without safety gear were null-prossed, or dropped. While this is all happening on the criminal side of things, the Puig family reached a reported $16 million settlement with Cecilia Pino, and the Fernandez family started the Lucy Fernandez Foundation for Boat Safety Awareness. And as we approach the June 2026 criminal trial, there has been a flurry of motions. Here are the major motions with specifics from both sides. From the defense's motion to dismiss and the related replies that followed, the defense argued that there are no material disputed facts, and that the undisputed facts do not establish a prima facie recklessness or culpable negligence. They listed dozens of stipulated facts and cited Miller v. State and Jackson v. State on the difference between a momentary lapse/inattention and gross or flagrant recklessness that evinces disregard for human life, especially when the operator's own family was aboard. The defense's argument is that this was a tragic accident from momentary inattention or mistake of judgment, but not conscious recklessness. Even if on the wrong side of traveling fast with weight distribution issues, that does not meet the legal threshold when weighed against all facts, including his own loved ones being aboard. The state's response is that Pino was using a high speed in a narrow channel, that it was his failure to maintain lookout, that there were navigation rule violations, and that even if there wasn't a legal impairment from alcohol, there was still alcohol contributory context. The state also argues that there were missed opportunities to avoid the collision despite familiarity with the channel pathways and operation of the very same vessel that he's used many times before, and that the inherent drowning risk created a totality of circumstances that was reckless and makes Pino culpably negligent. They emphasized the predictable outcome and that Pino had ample time and means to avoid the marker. Judge Tinkler Mendez denied the motion to dismiss. The defense also filed a motion in limine to exclude alcohol-related references. They wanted to exclude evidence that underage passengers drank from the cooler on Pino's boat. They wanted to exclude evidence of the 61+ empty alcoholic containers recovered on September 6, 2022. And they want to exclude testimony from Smiley and the FWC officer Julian Gazzola about seeing bloodshot eyes and observing an odor of alcohol on George Pino. The defense's argument is that the lead investigator testified alcohol was not a factor and that he observed no impairment. Any probative value is substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice, and that the containers came from multiple boats. From the defense motion to exclude post-accident statements, the defense is seeking to exclude statements that Pino made about another vessel creating a wake right before the collision and relating to alcohol consumption. The defense argues that because Thompson directed Pino to be moved to a different officer, Officer German's vessel, and that another FWC officer, Keith Hernandez, was told to go with the boat operator and maintain custody of him at all times, and also with an instruction to smell him, that Pino was not free to leave. In other words, he was in custody. Thompson later interviewed him, and the defense argues that this was custodial interrogation without a proper Miranda warning, and as such, the statements are privileged. They also argue that these statements are more prejudicial than probative. The state's position is that the statements were spontaneous or made during accident investigation and not during custodial times.
I'd like to ask permission to draw your blood. It's up to you completely. You know, I had 2 beers. And it's not illegal to boat and drive. It's not illegal to drink a couple beers and drive.
I feel perfect in the way that my mind was. I mean, I know what happened. I've been operating boats forever. I've done that right 1,000.
The state says that some statements may be protected by privilege, but others are admissible.
And the defendant is the one who volunteers additional information. If anything was ambiguous in terms of a Miranda waiver, this is it.
And the judge agreed. The judge ruled the statements admissible on June 1st of this year. And now that the defense has to deal with this issue at trial, they plan to raise a traumatic brain injury / false memory argument and will call neurologist Dr. Diana Barrett. The state's also requesting special jury instructions on navigational rules that apply to boaters. They argue that jurors might know the rules of the road for cars, but might not know the rules of the waterways for boats, and that these rules are directly relevant to whether the operation of the vessel by George Pino that day was reckless and creates culpable negligence. The prosecution's expert, Paul Alber, who's a Palm Beach Police Department lieutenant is expected to testify about navigation violations, wrong side of channel violations, how speed, weight distribution, distractions, and other issues can relate to predictable outcomes that could have been avoided. But that should be an overview of the major issues raised in pretrial motions. So now we just had jury selection wrap up on Friday, June 6th. Opening statements are scheduled for Monday, June 8th, which is when we'll be starting our trial watch. Judge Marisa Tinkler is also presiding over the Antonio Brown self-defense case, and she told the attorneys in that case, who tentatively have a stand your ground hearing scheduled for June 23rd, that this trial she's dealing with now, this George Pino trial, will be cutting up close to that date. So she's estimating about 8 to 9 days of presentation by the parties, and is hopeful that she'll be able to keep the Antonio Brown stand your ground hearing on track for the 23rd. So this is about a 2-week trial that we're expecting here. Now, I saw the Miami Herald report that the jury, which is a jury of 6, is 5 men, 1 woman, and that 4 alternates were selected. The alternates, there's 3 women and 1 man. And one of the jurors is apparently an avid boater. I also saw CBS News report that an incident occurred where one prospective juror told the judge that a different prospective juror was out in the hallway and was playing a news story out loud about this very case, about this George boat crash case, aloud outside of the courtroom somewhere in the hallway, and asking what year this occurred. And so the judge had to continue jury selection. And when the state asked last minute for a 1-week continuance after getting some late witnesses provided over by the defense, the judge was not with it. She said, "We are not delaying this trial."
Asking for like a week's continuance.
Denied.
On top of that, Judge, yesterday, they filed discovery exhibits
I'll have to
at
consider.
5:02.
Excuse me, I'll have to decide whether or not this witness, because of the late filing and the problems that it is now causing, whether or not I'm going to potentially exclude this witness.
I think that would be a reversible error, Judge, and I don't want to try this case twice.
Let me tell you all, we are not delaying this trial.
And Judge Tinkler Mendez found that these late filings were willful violations of what Florida calls the Richardson Rule. So next up, we have the trial, where the jury will decide whether this was a tragic accident or something where there was criminal recklessness or criminally negligent operation of this vessel by George Pino. So everything you heard in this deep dive comes from research into the court filings, the FWC Incident Summary Report, and by reporting from outlets like Miami Herald and CBS. So if you want to explore a little bit more, I'll put plenty of links in the description for you, and hope to see you as we watch the trial starting this Monday. Take care.